You dream of a vacation at the bottom of the ocean, but you can't float the bill? Have you always wanted to climb the mountains of Mars, but now you're over the hill? Then come to Recall Incorporated, where you can buy the memory of your ideal vacation cheaper, safer, and better than the real thing. So don't let life pass you by. Call Recall for the memory of a lifetime.
For the memory of a lifetime, recall, recall, recall.
Harry! You ever heard of Recall?
Recall?
You know where they sell those fake memories.
Oh, recall! Recall! You thinking of going there?
I don't know. Maybe.
Well, don't.
Why not?
A friend of mine tried one of their special offers, nearly got himself lobotomized.
No shit.
Don't fuck with your brain, pal. It ain't worth it.
Guess not.
Hey, Adrenalheads, welcome back to the show. I'm Mark.
And I'm Jason.
And this episode, we are covering Total Recall from 1990. And
which Mark says he has Total Recall of because he's seen it a million times.
I've seen it way too many times. Wow. So, yeah, we have the one and only Jason Cabassi from Podcastica, who...
Glad to be here.
Yeah.
I think I am actually the only Jason Cabassi on the whole planet, by the way.
I hope so. I'm not the only one and only Mark Kirkman, unfortunately. There's one out in England and near London. But yeah, he chose Total Recall, which was so cool because I just like and enjoy this particular movie. And it's from 1990, and it was directed by Paul Verhoeven, who is known for other sci-fi movies like RoboCop from 1987, Starship Troopers in 1997, and Hollow Man from 2000.
Classics
that are out there that everybody thought of him as pretty much like the director that went a little bit over the top at times. If you look at RoboCop, you will know.
Yeah.
So the tagline for this,
he hadn't, in the violence, right? And if he hadn't done that, I bet you his movies wouldn't have been as popular as they were.
Exactly. Yeah, they are very popular for the extremism and violence and things that are going on. We haven't covered RoboCop. That would be another thing that we'll be covering eventually.
I probably haven't seen that since the 80s, believe it or not.
Or the director's cut that was out there.
It's like 30 more seconds of machine gunning or something.
Yeah, somebody's penis getting blown off. Who knows? So the tagline for this particular movie would be, how would you know if someone stole your mind?
How do you know they haven't?
Exactly. You wouldn't know. It's one of those weird, strange things. Now, mind you, the movie's from 1990. They did a spinoff back in 2012. And we'll only mention that here and there on occasion.
I was excited about that, and then I heard it was bad, and so I didn't bother with it.
I did watch it. It had Colin Farrell.
What was it like?
It was a trip and a half for what they tried to remake. In my opinion, it was entertaining nonetheless, but everything took place on Earth. And this particular movie that we're covering from 1990, and it takes place on Mars at some point. So, spoilers, everybody. Yes, this is a spoiler full, and we actually have that in the notes. So, basically, we're going to be talking about Total Recall from 1990 with Mr. Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sharon Stone. And it's a spoiler full podcast about this particular movie. So if you haven't watched it, go back and watch the movie. If you haven't watched the movie, stop the podcast, go back, watch it, come back to the podcast, and then listen to us talk about it.
Yeah. And you know why I picked this one? Because it's Adrenaline Cinema Podcast. It's action movies. And honestly, I'm not really that much of an action movie person. I like horror. I like drama. I like comedies. I like action movies, but they're not my favorites.
Yeah.
But I do have favorites, a couple of favorites that stand out. One of which, my very favorite, is Mad Max Fury Road.
Oh yeah, that's a good.
But I already talked about that on a podcast, and then this is one of my other favorites. And I know, who doesn't love Arnold Schwarzenegger? I mean, I also love the Terminator movies, but so it's one of my few favorites, is what I'm trying to say. And I actually, even though it is, I hadn't seen it in probably decades, and so I was like, well, I hope this holds up. I hope this is as good as I remember it being. And I rewatched it and I loved it. So I'm glad. I'm really glad it held up.
Awesome. Yeah, like I said, there was a remake. It had Colin Farrell, Bryan Cranston, Jessica Biel, Kate Beckinsale, Bill Nye, John Cho, and a slew of other actors that we all know of in modern day, which was a modern day remake of it. It was a great cast. It was okay, in my opinion, entertaining, but I still go back to the 1990 version.
Do you think they were, because it's, of course, we're going to talk about it. It's based on a short story, right? Or a novella by Philip K. Dick called We Will Remember It For You Wholesale.
Yeah.
Were they trying to just go back to the source material, or what were they trying to do?
Not really. From what I do when I put in my unknown and interesting facts, that falls within that. I don't read those ahead.
Okay.
So I like to out. I like to be surprised when I actually read those. So I get them from some like reputable sources, and I just throw them in there and I copy and paste. I do the Mark Bernardin thing that he does on Fat Man Beyond and just copy and paste everything, and I just go from there. And I like to be surprised based upon that, for the fact that I won't know everything. I'm not the source of every material, but I like to pull from sources that do know. So with that, we're going to move right into this particular movie, which the synopsis is, Jason?
The synopsis is, when a man goes in to have virtual vacation memories of the planet Mars implanted in his mind, an unexpected and harrowing series of events forces him to go to the planet for real. Or is he?
Bum, bum, bum.
My answer is yes, he is, but I'll tell you why later.
Exactly. Yeah. We'll get into that. We love to digress. We love to talk about the movie in general, and that's how we work this particular podcast. So with that, we're going to go into people we know within the film. So Jason, start us off with our first one, obviously.
Leading man Arnold Schwarzenegger plays Quaid, and possibly what's the other guy's name? I forgot.
It's Douglas Quaid, and
what's the other guy's name? Can't remember. Oh, Hauser.
Yeah.
It says Arnold has been talked about before on this podcast with few episodes, but we'll mention a few of the movies that he's been in to remind you. Conan the Barbarian from 1982, The Terminator 1984, my favorite Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, Commando 85, which we've covered before here, along with the next two movies, Predator from 87, True Lies from 94, and recently on Netflix with his series Fubar that just came out this year, 2023, and his docuseries called Arnold in 2023, which of course talks about his life.
Which was actually pretty good and decent, honest view of his life too, everybody. So I highly recommend that. You could find it on Netflix.
Cool.
Fubar is really cool. I got through the first half. I still have to go back and finish it. It's an interesting take. It kind of feels like True Lies, but with a daughter. And that gets involved with some secret ops stuff that's going on there, which
it's not that, it wasn't good enough to keep you watching.
No, I got kind of sidebarred at that point. But the thing is that I should go back to it just to watch. I think I watched the first maybe 5 or 6 episodes. But the thing is that Arnold's trying to keep out there, get his name out there, and keep going. And he loves what he loves to do, which is act. He's no longer the governor. So
and I was glad he went back to it after he was governor of my fair state.
Yeah, but he's still moving on and prospering, and he through that docuseries he actually admits to a lot of things that he did throughout his life, which is very interesting. And you see it from day one, from when he started as a bodybuilder or independent bodybuilder, and then moving on and then going into movies and going on and continuing on into his governorship, as well as everything else in his life and all the things that went bad in his life. So he's very honest in it. So love for everybody to watch it, because you don't really see too many people open up about their life. And my feeling is that is amazing. So I have a lot of respect for the man, for the fact, he made his mistakes in life and he owns up to them. But he loves his family, loves everybody about it. So he continues on. And on top of that, he still continues to give us movies.
He's 76, by the way.
Yeah, I know. He's not a young man anymore. And he still has like a pig valve in his heart too. And I think that's an amazing effort in his life, because he's just very honest to who he is. Next up would be Sharon Stone, who plays Lori, who plays Quaid's wife in the movie in particular. The character. Yeah, sort of. A very well-known actress in cinema. She is known for a lot of movies, but here are a few that you can see her in. One of which that I picked out of all things, Alan Quatermain and the King Solomon's Mines in 1985. So that's very unknown. It was one of her first major roles. Then she continued on with the Alan Quatermain series with Alan Quatermain and the Lost City of Gold in 1986. And you could see Mr. James Earl Jones in that particular movie as well. Basic Instinct from 1992, also directed by Paul Verhoeven. Silver in 1993, and Sam Raimi's The Quick and the Dead in 1995, which I have a great love for, because I'm a huge Raimi fan.
Yeah, me too. Absolutely. Yeah, I think I don't remember if I saw the Alan Quatermain movies, but definitely saw Basic Instinct.
Yeah.
It was so popular back then.
Yeah, the Alan Quatermain movies were in like the mid 80s. So it was kind of like low budget, straight to HBO
Who
kind of
Alan
movies.
Quatermain?
Oh, who was Shogun? I forget his name.
That guy. Yeah.
That guy, that dude. Actually, I'm sure Rob will be covering that on Fantasy Picks Movie Edition at some point, because Rob had asked me to find something for Shogun recently. Everybody. So
Richard Chamberlain, or
Richard Chamberlain.
Okay.
Yeah. Interesting.
All right, then we have Michael Ironsides, the legendary Michael Ironside, playing Richter. A long list of movie credits. He started in 1974 with a Canadian TV movie called The Ottawa Valley. But here are a few mainstream movies you might know him from. Scanners from 81. I forgot he was in that. Top Gun, in 86, where he played Jester, which you guys covered on Adrenaline Cinema.
Yeah.
Starship Troopers, another Paul Verhoeven movie. And that's alumni. Wait, he did Starship Troopers, right? Paul Verhoeven did. Yeah,
he did.
Alumnus and The Covenant from 2018. You can be remembered on TV from shows like The A-Team, Smallville, and my favorite of all time, V, the miniseries. I mean, classic. I love it so much as a kid.
I love that.
Unforgettable in that.
I was 13 when that show came out.
So good.
And I loved it. I loved Mark Singer in it. And we had so many new characters and actors in it. And one of which that came from The Greatest American Hero that we actually touched upon on one of your call-in shows for your Patreon for Podcastica too, when we talked about stuff.
The Greatest American Hero?
Yeah. The female
the
lead.
girl.
Yeah, the female lead.
And also Robert England played.
Oh yeah,
like
Freddy Krueger,
alien guy.
Yeah,
like, super nice guy.
Yeah, of all people too. And that's one of the things that I loved about that particular series. They did a remake of V, but
not so good.
Marina Baccarin was amazing in it. I just love her.
She's
And
amazing doing anything. But the show wasn't great.
yeah, but it lasted one season. But
Yep.
yeah. Well, next up we have Rachel Ticotin, who played Melina, and she could be seen in movies like Falling Down in 1993, that had Michael Douglas in it.
I remember that.
Con Air in 1997, that had, of all things, Nicolas Cage. That we all love, that we actually covered here, and Man on Fire in 2004. So
yeah, I don't know if we've seen a whole lot of her since this.
Not really. Her credits kind of dwindled after 2004.
Then we have Ronnie Cox, who plays Cohagen. He started in 1972 with the TV movie called Look Homeward Angel. And he has 145 appearances in TV and film combined. And he's one of those guys that you're like, yeah, I feel like I've seen him in a million things. But here's a few movies. Deliverance in 72.
Mhm.
Beverly Hills Cop. Was he the angry police chief?
Yes, he was.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Vision Quest from 85. RoboCop from 87. And Being the Ricardos from 2021.
Yeah, that was straight to, I think, HBO docuseries about Lucy and Desi at that point.
Oh, yeah, I kind of wanted to watch that. I didn't get
It was an interesting take on it and their issues as a couple during the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then her being, subjected to criticism because she is a female actress and comedian. And I really enjoyed that for the fact that it brought out the truism that was out there. And her daughter actually was one of the producers. Vision Quest, which was an interesting movie in itself, too, because you had Keanu Reeves in that particular movie. And it was one of his first few appearances.
Oh, way back then? Because wasn't that the one? Yeah, it had that Madonna song in it. That's what I remember for it.
Yeah,
Crazy
yeah.
For You.
Yeah, a lot of
One of
people
my
did. And there
favorites.
was a girl from the TV show Fame that was in that as well. So I really do enjoyed Vision Quest. That's one of those one-off movies. It's kind of like My Bodyguard, if you remember that, back in the early 80s. And it was one of those movies that came and went. But you had Patrick Swayze in it. You had, Rob Lowe in it as well.
Mhm.
And it's one of those strange movies. But
I was just looking up who starred in Being the Ricardos, because you reminded me that I had been interested in that. And it was Nicole Kidman as Lucille Ball.
yeah,
And Javier Bardem as Desi Arnaz, which sounds amazing.
it is. It's a pretty decent docuseries based upon it and their life, literally, and film during that time, which was, if you look at it, it's a capture of that particular time.
Sure.
I like it.
Okay. Your turn, right?
Yep. Mel Johnson Jr., who plays Benny, started his career in 1981 with a TV movie called UB. Since then, he had appeared on multiple TV shows as a cameo actor until his movie break with the American Blue Note in 1989. He has since, after Total Recall, has done a few movies like Hideous in 1997, In the Shadows of the Cobra in 2004, Stuck in 2017, and shows like The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and also Star Trek DS9.
I think I remember.
Yeah,
that.
Jerry Gomez, who is a regular on this particular podcast, who loves Star Trek. He and I cover the Planet of the Apes series, as well as a lot of classic cinema.
It's cool.
Yeah.
And then last but not least, Dean Norris as Tony. I didn't know that was Dean Norris until just now. Most notably, of course, he's Hank Schrader from Breaking Bad, which aired on AMC 2008 to 2013. He was also in Terminator 2, Judgment Day from 1991, The Firm from 93, Tom Cruise, Starship Troopers from 97, another Paul Verhoeven movie, and The Negotiator in 98, to name a few. TV show appearances aside from Breaking Bad include The Big Bang Theory, Tremors, and Scandal.
Yeah. He's been around a long time. He's one of those familiar faces that you do see on TV as well as in cinema. And I always loved him from Breaking Bad, just like you.
Yeah.
because he played great as that particular brother-in-law who was part of the DEA and was tracking his unknown brother-in-law through that whole series. And I think that's where he made a great name for himself. But he started on like within this particular movie as a character actor. And he's the one, if you don't recall, hence the joke, total recall. Enough said. But basically, he's the one. It's like he goes, "Yeah, you have a lot of nerve about showing your face around here." And then Arnold just turns around and goes, "Yeah, you should be talking," because he's got that messed up face. Because the people from Mars.
I had no clue who it was.
Yeah. All right. So with that, we're gonna move right into general thoughts of the movie at this point. So this is what we thought about the movie when it came out, what we think about the movie now after we've seen it after so long, and does it hold up, and would you recommend it to somebody? So Jason, how do you feel about the movie? What did you feel about it when it first came out?
I'm nostalgic about this one because there was a 4-year period when I was in my teens that I worked at a movie theater, and this came out during that time. And so I loved it, and I'd go in during breaks and watch parts of it. And I just thought, Arnold was so big back then, but it was something crazier than normal and more sci-fi, more concepts, more, the setting was inventive and cool, and there's a lot of futuristicness to it. So it just really I don't know, it felt like more of a sensory barrage than his usual stuff. And also the way that it's kind of a mind fuck. But to be honest, I was more focused in back then on just it as a straight up action sci-fi movie. And then later in life, I became a fan of Philip K. Dick's novels. He of course wrote Droid's Dream of Electric Sheep, which they adapted into Blade Runner, and also the one that became Minority Report, and a couple others. And his books are all mind fucks, and reality can shift under your feet. You're not sure what's real. And so then I started to appreciate this movie more on that level. And now, I told you I hadn't watched it in many years, but watching it now, even more so, like, wow, there's twists within twists, and you can't tell for sure. So like I said, I'm not usually that big of an action movie fan, but I think one reason why I like this one more than most is because it's a lot of fun. It's got a lot of great action, and it's thrilling, but it also is really clever and intelligent. And so I think it also, like, you definitely feel effects wise, it's simultaneously super impressive, but also very dated. And so if you have to know what you're watching, that you're going into an 80s movie where they just went all out with the technology they had at the time, but it doesn't feel slick like today's movies. It feels like rubbery kinds of things, and screens that you can tell are superimposed and things like that. But I find it very charming, and I think most people would too, but I think it's just worth saying that given all that, totally I would recommend watching it.
All right, cool. You would recommend it to anybody who'd never seen it before. Just say, hey, take a look at this in comparison to the remake. What do you think in comparison? I think this has a better mind effing view over the story in comparison to the newer version, in my opinion.
I didn't see it, like I said, because I heard it was bad, but I was curious about that. And now that you're telling me that makes me feel like they missed the boat, because it's such a huge part of the story in
the movie. They tried
the written story.
I think the written story and the original movie adaptation tried to gear it more towards to the true adaptation of what they were trying to project within the original written document that was there. The newer movie was more adaptive in the sense of making it more modernized, giving us more visuals. I'm not saying that Colin Farrell didn't do a great job. Jessica Biel
didn't do a very good job. No,
or Kate Beckinsale. I'm sorry, you got beautiful women in there that are amazing, intelligent, that are portraying these, and you got these actors who are doing their best with the material that they're given. for that particular movie, but I always liked this for the fact that this was more gritty, and I love practical effects myself. And that's the one reason what it attracted to me, along with the fact, hey, hello, we got Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah.
Mr. Schwarzenegger.
And just like you're saying that they didn't do as much of the whole mindfuckery thing, that is so key to this movie. And it is a reason why I would recommend it. And another thing, I mean, I found out reading through your notes that David Cronenberg was originally associated with this movie, and he was going to direct it. And I think he wrote out a draft of the script. That they kept some of the things that he had written. And as soon as I read that, I knew that Kuato was one of the things that must have been from Cronenberg, because Cronenberg is known for body horror and body dysmorphia. And so this movie, because Guato I find so disgusting, but it's interesting because the combination of Philip K. Dick's mind fuckery and Cronenberg's body horror is great, because it feels like neither your mind nor your body are your own kind of thing, and that both of that is in this movie.
It makes you want to know what drugs were they all on at that time by the time they did this film, or when he wrote the book.
Well, Philip K. Dick started to go nuts, and I thought he was doing a bunch of psychedelics, but I read up on him, and he was doing a lot of speed just to help him stay up and write. And I think if you do enough speed, you can start to go a little nuts.
Hallucinate. Kind of. I think Stephen King was like one of those people too. He was doing a lot of cocaine at certain points. He actually did that during Maximum Overdrive, of all things. Not to digress, too. By the way, it's everybody. Yeah, we'll be covering that movie at a later time, because I love that movie. But I'm waiting on the right person that actually wants to go into ultimate horror on that one.
That's cool.
But I love this movie from when I first saw it in the theater back in 1990. I was just fresh out of high school, and I was like, oh, I'm seeing all these movies with my friend, my buddy Chris, who I call Monster, and we went to go see it because obviously it's a Schwarzenegger movie, but on top of that, it's got sci-fi action in it. And it was based upon a sci-fi kind of short story, or a story from a book. And I was like, all right, I got to see this. And I love the idea of the whole mind fuckery within it. And it was nice to have that on top of that, because we already had that with Running Man with Schwarzenegger, which was a Stephen King adapted movie in the 80s. And he was going on that whole relevance. And mind you, listeners, we will eventually get to Running Man, because I originally read that particular book, as well as loved the movie, regardless of how cheesy it could be at times. Because you had wrestlers and everything else, but you had Schwarzenegger trying to push the envelope and what he was doing, and trying to be on top and be competitive, of course, with Stallone. But it to me,
Richard Dawson was
Richard Dawson was in that particular movie.
Family Feud guy,
But I love the fact that we got to go see this, and there was a little bit of a twist within the story plot, the character. So there was something mental within it that actually achieved what Arnie loved about the actual sci-fi-ness of the movie. Plus, there's one scene in particular in the movie that I love, because it reminds me of the movie Riki-Oh. That was a Japanese kung fu psychological, or not psychological, kind of one of those mystical kind of movies from Japan. And they had the thing with the bulging eyes. Verhoeven pulled it off with the effects within it, where you see them there in Mars atmosphere, and you see the girl and him, and they're bracing themselves, and their eyes kind of bulge out and plug out like crazy. To me, that was like, oh, wow, okay, you got me there, because I just love the idea of that fact, because of the craziness of the physical or visual effects at that time. They were all practical. And now that would have been done with CG, but I just love that aspect. And plus, honestly, I was fresh out of high school, and who doesn't like to have women with 3 breasts?
The more the better.
So, if you want 4, it's a little bit too much, but 3 is great. But not to quote Paul, it's like, oh, you're going to put 4? That's sick. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, 4. That's just too many. You know, I kind of glanced through your notes and saw, because we're going to read through these later, but
Yeah.
I just want to point out, since you mentioned it a couple times, it says the 1990 film was both one of the final movies to heavily utilize miniature effects and one of the first to employ computer-generated imagery.
Yes.
So I don't know what was CG in this movie, but something was.
There was a little bit here and there. Like I said, I just pull from a reputable source when it comes to that. But there are a lot of visual effects that are standard for that time within 1990. So you have backdrops, you got stop motion, you also have, they use a train car of all things. And I know this for the fact that they use a backdrop and they use an actual train to create the idea of Mars and everything else like that.
Yeah. This is saying that the sequences with Schwarzenegger's passage through the transit station's X-ray machine. So
yes,
it wasn't too complicated,
Yeah, it wasn't too complicated, but nowadays, in comparison to today, back then it was top notch. But
yeah, for sure, impressive.
Seeing the skeletal.
How did they do that? Yeah,
how did they do that? Oh my god! I could see his skeleton. Oh, there's a gun on his hip, and you see the bones in the outer laying of his body and his skin. Yeah, that's probably the scene that they actually were referring to, which is pretty cool, and I really do enjoy that stuff, and I love the idea that we get older stuff like that, and it's very similar to like with Starship Troopers or even with RoboCop back in that day. So effects were very much experimental for its time when it came to CG, as well as working with practical at that time. It was that whole turnover, because by the time of 1990 we were looking at what? Terminator 2 Judgment Day to come out. And a lot of that stuff was coming out with computer effects.
Yeah.
So this kind of launched that to push it. Sherlock Holmes, young Sherlock Holmes, was the first to use digital effects back in the day through, through Lucasfilm and ILM. And
great movie.
Yeah, it was a great movie for its time. But, this is one of those that was experimental for its time to incorporate that. So, but right now we're going to move along right into our favorite scenes within a particular movie. So, Jason, what was your first favorite scene? Now, mind you, they don't have to be in any specific order. You could just go, what have you?
Well, let's see. So one of my favorite things about the movie is how you don't know it's real or not. And because, you think if you're really paying attention, you're thinking the whole time, all right, is this whole adventure he's on just what he signed up for? That he's having his recall experience. And one thing that I think that makes that really interesting is, if that's true, then part of it is within the, where he's laying there on the table and everything's happening in his brain. Part of that is that they erase his memory that he even signed up for it. But so it would be funny or interesting to have someone go on a spy adventure in your brain, and then within that adventure, somebody erases your memory that you were on the adventure. So then you don't really get to enjoy it, because you don't know that you're in it anymore, right? You just don't know what the fuck is going on. But
you're a schizophrenic at that point, if you think about it.
But so the reason why I'm bringing all that up as backdrop is because the scene where he's on Mars and this guy, Dr. Edgemar, comes in and tells him that you were not really here. You're strapped to a chair in recall. You've suffered a schizoid embolism, which they talked about some other guy that was lobotomized just to give you the fear of, should you really be doing this?
Correct.
And so then it's like, okay, if you believe him, then he is in this fantasy, but it's not, but there's a problem. And this guy has come in as an emergency thing to get him to take this red pill to fix it. And then Sharon Stone, Laurie, shows up and she's back to saying she's his wife and take the pill, honey. But then Arnold sees him sweating, Quaid, and kills him. And so then all of a sudden Laurie just is back to being her like, all right, fine, you fucker, like she's back to being like, I'm just acting as your wife. So you think, okay, everything Edgemar said was a lie. He was sweating because he was lying, and that she's actually not his wife. But it could actually be that this is still part of the adventure, that everything is fine, and he's still having his recall adventure. It could be that everything he said was a lie, and then he really was the spy, and he's not in his head at all. Or it could be that everything he said was absolutely true, that he is still in this fantasy, but he had this brain embolism, because he said, if you shoot me in the head, you'll be stuck in permanent psychosis, or if you kill me, the walls of reality will come crashing down. You'll be the savior of the rebel cause, but after that, you'll be Cohagen's buddy, this bad guy mayor of Mars, and you'll have fantasies about alien civilizations, and at the end you'll be back on Earth lobotomized. And all of that happened. He was, the part that you wouldn't think was true is you'll be Cohagen's buddy, but then within the story you find out that his real self was working with him. Yeah. And so it could be any one of those three. It could either be he's actually on this spy adventure, he's just in his head having the exact kind of adventure he was supposed to have, or he's in his head and he had this embolism, and then when he killed this guy, he became in permanent psychosis, and he's going to be lobotomized on Earth based on that. So you still, I think that's the point of the movie, is by the end, you can't know for sure which. It could be either or. And I just love that.
It kind of represents exactly what's within the book,
I
probably.
don't know. Yeah,
in
I
a
read
sense,
it was so long ago, I don't even remember.
Yeah, from what I remember, it kind of like made you feel like what was real, what wasn't real, and you always question yourself. So it was kind of choose your fate back in the day when you had those books of choose your journey. Choose your own adventure. And in this case, with the particular writing, the way he had done it in the book, they kind of represented it that way too. And the way it ended too, because the way it ends is they look like they're happy at the very end. But
then she says, what if this is all a dream? Or he says that, and she goes, well, just kiss me before I wake up. And by the way, since we're talking about all this stuff, I really did go down this Philip K. Dick rabbit hole a while back and read about 3 or 4 of his books. The 3 Stigmata of Palmer Eldritch, and you'll feel schizophrenic when you read those. And then when Inception came out and everyone was going nuts for it, I was just like, oh, this is child's play. Go read some Phil K.
That's it's half of what. Yeah, it's half of what you would actually get through. Oh my god, it's like the Naked Lunch on acid.
Exactly.
Yeah. I love reading books like that on occasion, but I really don't want to get too much because I don't want to go too crazy.
Yeah, for sure.
But within the actual movie itself, there was a couple of characters that I did enjoy. We got Mel Johnson Jr., who plays Benny,
heartbreaking,
who introduces, heartbreaking character of all things, because he's kind of twisted in the sense that he gets Quaid's trust in the very beginning, and then at the very end, holy crap, it turns around on him, for Quaid. And then on top of that, you get Harry. It's like, recall. I remember the advertisement, recall. And it's like, don't do that. They'll scramble your brains, man. I was like, I think he was probably the truest character out of anybody. He might have been a plant, or he might not have been a plant by a company. So, and Robert Costanzo actually does it perfectly. And being friends with Quaid, and then, whether or not it's true or fake, who knows? Because everything is within Quaid's mind for all we know throughout this whole movie.
Do you want me? So I think that the movie does give one tell that says that it's all real, that the plot is actually that he's this guy Hauser working with Cohagen, and he's trying to wipe out the rebellion. But they know the rebellion has psychics, so that's why they took away Hauser's memories and made him think he was Quaid and installed Laurie as his fake wife to watch over him and sent him on this journey that would basically, to make a long story short, get him in with the rebels, they could follow him
with Richter and his
him.
group.
And I think that's what happened, only because before he ever went to recall, he was with his wife, Laurie, and they were all happy and sunshiny. And then when he leaves, all of a sudden her face changes, like she's been acting the whole time. And I'm like, wait a minute, he hasn't been to recall yet. He hasn't started on this supposed adventure, and yet she's looking like she's a bad guy. So the only way that could be true is if it's all real. Now, maybe she just doesn't really love him and she's having an affair or something, it could be a coincidence, but that's the reason why I think that it was all real.
Well, the acrobatics and the karate and everything else that she was doing on him does show a lot that it is somewhat true, in my opinion.
Happens after he's been to recall, so you can't take anything at face value after that. It could all just be in his head. But that's the one thing that happens that if she's acting, then that means she's a spy. Yeah. It
was like a trigger at that point where, you could see maybe it was a trigger in his head and this is what he's thinking. And then he winds up killing her in the end.
That's his divorce.
Unfortunately.
Consider that a divorce.
Yeah, that's his divorce. Which, honestly, Sharon Stone played a sexy, crazy wife at that point, but we all loved it, honestly. I think that's where she got her role from Basic Instinct.
Another thing that stood out to me watching this movie is because we've been through Me Too, and we're in the world has a different vibe now where, and it just really stood out that the women were all like pretty much sex objects. Every single woman in the movie was attracted to Arnold, like the receptionist at Recall gave him eyes, the administrator, even the older woman inside the section.
Correct.
Even
Melina,
as he's undergoing the process, the recall process, and he's starting to, because they gave him a sedative, he's starting to go to sleep, and they go, we have some questions for you to make sure you have the best experience. And all they ask him is what kind of women he likes. That's it. And and then of course there's the 3-breasted woman who shows her boobs 3 times. And as a kid or in the 80s, you don't think twice about any of that. But now it's sort of like, wow, it's all focused on women as sex objects.
Sexual objects. But also women of power as well. If you think about it too, Laurie, Melina,
that's true,
are very strong people. Even in the alternative aspect of what he sees as Laurie as being somebody who works for Hook Cohagen, and then Melina, who is part of the rebellion, and
they're fighters.
It shows his attractiveness and the fighters that are out there. Even Thumbelina that's there. The little person that's out there, and she's trying to get her own for what she needs to do on Mars.
They're not helpless. That's
the
for
little
sure,
person that was a hooker. No. They're not helpless. Even the 3-breasted hooker that was on Mars.
But the scene where Benny's like fondling her, that was the one where I really felt uncomfortable with it. Right? It was like, dude.
Yeah. That. It was like, it's like right out there. Too, it's like, all right, just don't make it too obvious. It's not Pornhub, but the funny thing is though, with the remake, they actually brought back the 3-breasted woman in that particular movie, which is so funny. But by that time, it's like, okay, it's been done already, but the prosthetic one looked better than the CG version one, in my opinion. But kudos to those women that would actually do that on film, to show that, that gumption to actually go through with it. Because some women would be like, no, I'm not going to do that. And I don't blame them. That's like any guy that would just jump on screen and show his junk. Oh yeah, that too. Ever penis hands. I don't know. But we have a lot of diversity within the movie itself when it comes to characters and how they're played. We kind of mentioned them of how Melina and Laurie are very different at certain points, but also strength in their character itself. but also how Quaid himself is unknowing, but still has that Hauser attitude within him to rebel. And on top of that, rebelling against Cohagen himself, as well as the other people that work for Cohagen. So, and it seems to me like when I watch this movie, and I've watched it so many times, honestly, it seems like a nightmare in one's own mind. It's like a dream that just never ends. And it's something you could have multiple nights, and it
Yeah.
could go different
I mean,
ways
it's-
every night.
It's everything he
You know?
asked for, though. You know, he wanted to have some meaning in his life, and he ends up like causing all these oppressed people on Mars to have a better environment and not be under this evil guy's thumb. He wanted adventure. He wanted this athletic brunette. You know, so you could say it's a nightmare, but he ended up getting everything he wanted to. So it was the adventure that he signed up for, I think.
Yeah, that is true.
Would you do it? Would you do it?
Yeah, I just
The recall process?
probably not. Oh no, I would lose my mind if that was the case, in my opinion. I just love the idea that we did get Kuatu. And I love the idea of that what we got to see visually because of like
So
Stan
well done.
Winston's little
It bothered me
puppet
so much
that's
back
on
then,
his
and
stomach.
now I really appreciate it more. I mean, I think even back then I thought it was great to have in the film, but I just find it really disturbing too.
When I went to school for the Institute of Audio Research, we actually had the founder of the school. It's a trade school for audio engineering, for those of you who didn't know, in New York City. And it was in downtown in the village of New York City off of 8th Street. And I went there and I got my certification in audio engineering there. But the owner had a distended stomach. And a lot of us said, that's Kuatu. Because he had it was like some sort of surgical thing that he had going on, but we didn't know. But he was so old. He was an older man, you know, he's long past, but you know, a lot of respect to him for what he gave us back then. And he was amazing. And I always said it's Kuatu. And he didn't understand it because he didn't really watch any modern movies at that time. And we were all in trade school at that point. And he goes, "Oh, you bunch of hippies," or well, at this time I had long hair. I had hair past my shoulders, blonde hair. And I would go to my shows and play shows as a bass player and stuff like that, but also go to school. And all of us had long hair and tattoos and stuff like that. So it was pretty funny because I would see him and I would say, oh, that's Cohagen. But it was kind of like a matter of respect for the man himself that created the Institute of Audio Research. It was amazing. But I had a lot of memories about that too, because it was within around that time. It was like maybe 2 or 3 years later, but we all knew that. We always used that.
It was an interesting idea. I remember because the guy who it's not just like they're conjoined twins or something, because the guy to bring Kuato out, he says he's coming, and then when Kuato sort of presents himself, he goes
into a trance.
Like there's something strange going on there where one has to be asleep
Magical.
for the other one to be awake or something like that. Seems like.
Yeah, and it was
he's
magical
psychic,
in that sense.
It's really interesting.
Yeah, that was one of my few favorite things, along with the whole Richter scenes of him getting involved and going after Quaid during that time, having to go after him after he killed Lori, who was supposedly his wife, you know, it was Richter's wife. And then and it was more of the mission at that point. And then feeling through with what Cohagen was telling him to do. And then obviously you got Dr. Edgemore, which was interesting too, because Edgemore was like, you know, he comes in and he thought he killed him, but he goes, "Oh, I'm a hologram, blah, 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 blah. This is a fictitious moment in your life." And then he winds up shooting him in the head because he was like, "If you shoot me or kill me right now, you're only going to further your psychosis." And he does, and he just shoots him, and it just goes on, and we get the story continue. And I thought that was really, really cool because it was a mind fuck, in my opinion. I thought it was really interesting, and I don't think it completes itself within the remake.
Too bad.
In my opinion.
Well, I
Yeah.
want to talk about some of the tech, because that's what stood out to me. That
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Oh, the
Well,
wallpaper that was
I
there,
was
or
sort
that
of
was
making
like,
a note of
yeah,
the
scenery.
different tech and trying to remember how I thought of it back then. So yeah, there's this 3-paned wall, and
Okay.
it showed, what were they watching, the news or something, and she turned it into a nice like nature scene.
Like
Yeah.
like a nature wallpaper
And
that
that-
was active, something that's similar that we could get
Yeah.
on our
Back then in
iPads
1990,
or
we didn't, I mean, maybe flat screen existed in some form, but no one had it. I don't even know if it existed yet. We all had these big
Yeah.
CRTs. So even just the idea of a flat screen was futuristic. It seemed like the sci-fi to us. It
Mhm.
was. And now if you have enough money, you could get that exact wall. Like LG does these big old paper thin
Yeah.
TVs, right? Oh, I'm sure.
I
Yeah,
put
yeah,
them
yeah.
up. Honestly. Yeah, I do a home theater installation professionally, everybody. You guys know this. I'm not going to say where I do it, but I put up those
Yeah.
wallpaper style
So it's
ones,
real.
and it's a pain in the ass, but it is real, and it's something that we deal with
The
on a daily
woman
basis.
tapping her fingernails to change the color. Nope. Still sci-fi as far as I know. Can't do that. The
Yep.
Johnny Cab, the driverless taxi, that's real. I was in a driverless taxi in San Francisco just a couple of weeks ago. And it's new.
Oh, wow.
It's only in a couple places right now, but it's happening. We went a 20-minute ride through San Francisco with no driver. They had like sort of laptop things with video. That might not even occur to us now that seemed futuristic, but at the time it totally did. And also
Mhm.
video calls in the car with Richter and Cohagen. That was futuristic at that time. It was not
Mhm.
happening. Yeah, it's
Now
like
it's on your
nothing.
phone.
The hollow projector, nope, we don't have that. Where he can make himself appear. The whole Recall Incorporated thing where you implant memories, we don't have that. You get 2 weeks of memory, seems as real as any memory in your head. You can be someone else, but it does remind me of escapism that we have, starting with books and then movies and then video games and now VR. And so
VR,
it's sort of
yeah.
like we're heading towards that. And now like Elon Musk's company Neuralink is developing this brain computer interface, and I think it could lead to stuff like that
wow.
eventually. So it's not real now, but maybe 20 years from now or something like that.
Wow, there was a movie that came out years ago that was very much like a video game, kind of like that. I'm forgetting her name, but she. Oh wow! Fast Times in Ridgemont High.
That wasn't
and
too sci-fi. It was more high school. I'm just kidding.
No. No. I'm not not Fast Times itself, but hold on. I'm gonna do a quick search. Richmond High, and it was Jennifer Jason Leigh movie, and it was called Existence, and it actually had Jude Law in it, and it was about a video game that you put a virtual reality headset that put you in the game mentally, and it was like a Burroughs kind of book movie game kind of thing, where it was that whole plot twist, very similar to what Total Recall has, but there were people who were rebellious about the game. There were people who were rebellious within the game itself, and it kind of comes out through it, and it's amazing. It's something that I would, recommend for those people. It came out on like HBO or Cinemax years ago, and it's kind of like an unsung kind of movie, but I highly recommend it. It's called
I remember hearing something about
Existence with a Z
but if
at the
this
very
was
end.
real, this whole recall tech, and it was safe, which it did not seem safe in the movie, but because somebody got a lobotomy. But I mean, maybe at this point it was actually safe, and he was just having the adventure he was supposed to have. That could be. Anyway, I would do it. I would request, can I please not have my memories erased within the adventure, because I want to know that I'm actually having this adventure and not go nuts, right?
The adventure,
if I
right?
could know that I would understand what was happening the whole time, I would totally do it. You could go inside Night of the Living Dead, or, I mean, maybe you wouldn't want to do a horror movie, but I would totally try it out. Because I already do VR.
we could try it out, but as long as you don't, as long as
or
you
get
don't
hurt
die
to death.
every
Like,
time,
maybe
you
it would
know,
be good if you had some way of just popping out of it at will, just so you know that you wouldn't be stuck.
yeah, and then just
Yeah.
pop back in
Yeah.
whenever need
That's
be,
exciting.
and then just have fun with it.
On sort of tech and science is all the Mars stuff. So the Mars atmosphere looks very red. And now that we have images from the Mars rover, we know it doesn't quite look like that. But I think they kind of needed that so you could have the contrast to when the atmosphere poured in at the end. Also, no colonies on Mars, but again, with Elon Musk, like his whole SpaceX, that's the point of it, is to colonize Mars if that's what he wants to do. So maybe we're heading in that direction. By the way, I've mentioned Elon Musk twice now. He's a man that I've highly admired in the past, and I don't admire what he's done with Twitter. I do still admire what he's done with some other things, though, to say the least.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of X. I'm not a fan of X. Actually, I don't take part in X too much anymore.
Cesspool.
And but I do admire what I do admire about what he has done is the exploration of
electric
space.
Cars, amazing.
Of electric cars, like prospering of man.
Yeah,
what we could do with the world,
it's incredible,
things of that nature. You own something that he actually created, which was Tesla, which was like a Tesla vehicle.
He just took advantage of things that other people were doing. I don't buy it. I think you got to be at the head of a company like that and push it forward. You have to have some talent. But one more thing about Mars. So then the whole like adding oxygen to Mars, so it's livable. Of course, that hasn't happened, but there has been a lot of thought on how to do that. I was reading like the idea of using plants to convert CO2 to oxygen, but that would just require so much like massive biomass and time to make it happen, or using machines to extract oxygen from rocks and soil on Mars. You'd need thousands of machines and it would be super energy intensive. So we don't have the current technology, but it could be a possibility at someday. I don't know. I think all of this could be possible at some point,
Well, they call them full things. So we're going to use something that we talked about this, and Kelly Burgess and I, as well as Wendy at Eppers, we talked about this on Aliens. And Alien, there's these things that they talked about back in the late 70s for Alien called terraformers. They would actually terraform
Star Trek
a planet,
too, right?
And it takes decades in order for it to happen.
Yeah, it was
not
so
like
quick,
in a
it was
heartbeat.
ridiculous.
So
in this movie, they're gonna
in this movie it was a little bit nuts.
But luckily, Mars was terraformed in about 15 seconds, and they're fine.
Yeah. But the one takeaway I would like for a lot of people to get a take from this is that women were kind of subjectified in this movie, but they also were shown with a lot of strength in it.
For sure.
So, I love that fact in the sense that it gave them a lot of strength in who they are and what they could do, as far as like protecting themselves, doing everything. So I like that aspect in a sense that a woman could stick up for herself. And that's not me saying I want to be kicked in the nuts anytime soon.
Just don't deserve it then.
Yeah, exactly. But it gives like it had its moments because it was like basically it was the beginning of the 90s. So it was like towards the end of the 80s. So we didn't get Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which I love. But those are our thoughts and favorite scenes within the particular movie itself. So
with all this, like you don't know what's real, and I just love that they added that last twist of that he was working against himself. Like they just added one more layer of, oh my God, that's insane. That just really, watching it again now to see if it held up, that just cinched it for me. Like, wow, that's genius. Cause I'd forgotten that. So that was so cool.
All right. Well, with that, we're going to take a bit of a break. And we're back. And now we're going to move on right along into interesting facts and unknown facts about the movie, which is Total Recall from
All right,
1990.
number one, the movie was in development for over a decade. In 1976, fledgling screenwriters Ronald Shusett and Dan O'Bannon teamed up to adapt Philip K. Dick's short story, We Can Remember It For You Wholesale. The pair purchased the rights to the piece that year, but soon hit the first of many delays on the road to the screen. Difficulties in reimagining the story as a film forced the pair to take a long break from the Dick story to work on a different project. This distraction would prove rather fortuitous, ultimately becoming the screenplay for Ridley Scott's Alien. Over the course of many years, the screenplay went through more than 40 revisions. And I found out, I didn't realize this, but Dan O'Bannon also wrote and I think directed Return of the Living Dead.
Yes, he did. And he wrote Alien too, as well. Yeah. So I thought that was amazing too, because I just love Dan O'Bannon's work. Next up, Total Recall almost cost the world The Fly. So even after Shusett and O'Bannon's script found a patron in power, producer Dino De Laurentiis, setbacks persisted as finding that the right director proved challenging. David Cronenberg, then only the precipice of his cult glory, was the first director assigned to the project. He opted to take on Total Recall instead of an offer to direct a different film, The Fly, which was then snagged by commercial director Rob Bierman. After spending a year working on the Dick adaptation, Cronenberg parted ways with the production, handing the baton off to Tender Mercies director Bruce Beresford. Cronenberg's returned his sights to The Fly, a newly vacant job after the departure of Bierman due to a personal tragedy, ultimately making it his most iconic feature. By the time Total Recall actually went into production, Beresford would be gone too.
I feel like the right people got the right jobs there. I love The Fly with Jeff Goldblum, and that's got a lot of body horror in it too, of course. And Total Recall with Verhoeven was super fun.
That was a great remake of a Universal movie, in my opinion.
And I like part 2 as well with Eric Stoltz.
Eric Stoltz was great.
Version was considered too faithful to the story. As the story always goes, quote, creative differences prompted Cronenberg to jump ship on Total Recall. While the director approached the project hoping to pay homage to Philip K. Dick's writing, its producers fostered a divergent vision that Cronenberg described as Raiders of the Lost Ark go to Mars. In a 2003 conversation with Wired, the filmmaker remembered an odd exchange with the writing team. Quote, eventually we got to the point where Ron Shusett said, you know what you've done? You've done the Philip K. Dick version. I said, isn't that what we're supposed to be doing?
Yep, exactly. That's what they should be doing. Next up, some of Cronenberg's creations remain in the final cut. Awesome. So, although the project shifted gears in a major way following Cronenberg's departure, he did leave behind a few creative concepts that survived in the version of Total Recall that hit theaters. Chief among them was the community of Martian mutants. Among the movie's most memorable moments, including the major character, Kuatu.
Because Cronenberg.
Yeah.
The Quaid Hauser character went through an image overhaul. Producer De Laurentiis' initial vision of the film's hero, Douglas Quaid, originally named Quail, / Carl Hauser, was decidedly more in line with Dick's short story, a schlubby office drone who dreams of a more exciting life. With this characterization in mind, his first choice for the part was Richard Dreyfuss. Over time, the desired machismo of the film's leading man increased, prompting suggestions like William Hurt, courtesy of Cronenberg, and Patrick Swayze. I think Richard Dreyfuss in this role would have been pretty awesome too, but it would have been a way different kind of movie. But he's great. I think that would have been awesome.
Yeah. The first Arnold Schwarzenegger was turned down for being too manly. Really? We all know that. Despite the gradual growth of Quaid's imagined virility, there was a limit to how far De Laurentiis was willing to stray from the original character. He insisted that someone like Arnold Schwarzenegger was out of the question for the part, and even turned down the Terminator star when Schwarzenegger expressed interest in the role.
So to get the part, Schwarzenegger led another company to buy the movie. Schwarzenegger saw an opportunity when De Laurentiis production company, De Laurentiis Entertainment Group, went bankrupt. The actor convinced Carolco Pictures, to whom he had recently worked with on Red Heat, to purchase the rights to Total Recall. And I remember, like, we saw him as Conan, but he was kind of quiet, right? And then Terminator didn't say a word, hardly. Well, he said a few words, but he just had a stony look. So
correct.
You didn't think of him as having acting chops, but then he started doing roles with a little more subtlety and humor to them and vulnerability. And you're like, no, he's got a charm for sure. He can do it.
Yeah, I think Arnold at that point start to feel his stardom and his pull in Hollywood, and that's why he was able to get where he needed to be. And actually, you could actually watch that on his Netflix show about his life. Schwarzenegger had an unusual amount of control over production, so that's the next one. The coveted role of Quaid was not the only thing Schwarzenegger won in Transaction. In addition to become welcome to recruit the director of his choice, as a big fan of RoboCop, he picked Paul Verhoeven. Schwarzenegger maintained authority over all creative aspects of the film, script, production, and even elements of distribution. For instance, Schwarzenegger took issue with the portrayal of the movie in its TriStar Pictures studio trailer, demanding that the company create and release a preview that better represented Total Recall. Furthermore, when the actor was dissatisfied with the middling public awareness conjured by the movie in the weeks leading up to the release, he convinced Carolco to invest more and more money into marketing until virtually everyone had heard of Total Recall. So he knew the elements of marketing. I mean,
it was huge
and pushing.
It was,
Well, he knows how to do that because that's how he became the governor.
The movie was originally rated X. The notorious X rating did not enjoy a particularly long tenure in the culture of United States cinema, starting in 1968 and lasting only up until 1990, when it gave way to NC-17. Yeah, I mean, they couldn't, like, if they thought a movie was too graphic or whatever, well, even
overtly
if it was graphic violence to be rated R
or bloody,
the next rating up was X, but X had become associated with porn, and so no director wanted their movie to be rated X. I mean, they didn't really want NC-17 either, but anyway, they kind of put NC-17 as to say, okay, this is worse than R, but it's not a porn. Basically.
Yeah, that's why we have MA for mature. If you think about it now.
I think NC-17 is still what they would use for movies, because MA is TV, but I don't know if there are any movies that have NC-17.
I've not seen
Total
any.
Recall, heavy and graphic violence and soaked in bloodshed would have been one of the last movies rated X were not softened up late in production in the interest of achieving the more commercially viable R rating.
Yeah, the MPAA could be a real butcher to things nowadays, but now with everything being unrated, rated M for mature, and NC-17 for theater use, how often are we going to see that? Because if they feel that it's like, okay, it's going to be an NC-17, I'll put a direct-to-video. And I know a couple of directors that will state that. It's like, no, I'll just put it right to video and for streaming. But next up, the movie's futuristic vehicles were actually Mexican public transportation. Awesome. Interesting. A memorable sequence involves Schwarzenegger's character speeding away from the pursuers through a futuristic public train station. Though evocative of the film's 2084 setting, the station and its vehicles were in fact actual features of Mexico City public transportation system. Minor touch-ups like sleek silver paint and television screens were applied to boost the ultra-modern feel, but surprisingly little effort was needed to make the setting read as of another
makes
time.
Me want to go to Mexico City. We Jenny and I have talked about going there.
Yeah,
check it out at some point.
It's almost similar to like if you go to the tubes in Montreal in Canada too. Those are very much like that as well.
Total Recall marked the transition from old to new special effects. This is what I was talking about before. The 1990 film was both one of the final movies to heavily utilize miniature effects and one of the first to employ computer-generated imagery. The former camp, the miniatures, which involves the projection of film shots inside miniature scale model sets, includes a number of Total Recall's Mars scenes. In the latter category, the CGI are only sequences featuring Schwarzenegger's passage through a transit station's X-ray machine. The coming years would see CGI quickly become the predominant form of special effects used in Hollywood filmmaking, with a miniature model method all but losing its place to more advanced techniques following Total Recall. But there has been a move towards using more practical. I know they like to do that in The Mandalorian a lot, you know. So they know people like it.
Yeah, well, yeah, you got shows like Daryl Dixon, The Walking Dead.
For sure.
Anything that's horrific usually has practical effects mixed with CG. Yeah, which is fine. I don't mind that marriage of that. It's when it's as long as it looks great and the melding is well and the budget is there for it. So that's what really, my feeling is, because I know. And I've met way too many effects creators like Christopher Nelson, Tom Savini. I met Dick Smith when I was in high school, and it's getting to know the people who actually do the physical makeup effects. But I always wanted to meet Stan Winston. Never got to meet him, but it's the marriage between that makes a better film, in my opinion. But well, next up, the Martians' guards were real American soldiers. So they were G.I. Joe. Okay. All the actors portraying guards in the movie's Mars scenes are, in fact, genuine American Marines and naval officers. Well,
thanks
thank
for
you
your
guys.
service in the Total Recall movie and elsewhere.
Exactly. And thank you for your service in life, too.
Got sick or injured on set. Multiple cast and crew members had to be hospitalized during production. First, a craft services foul-up resulted in almost everybody on set enduring a bout of food poisoning. Only Schwarzenegger, who ate privately catered food, and the fanatically health-conscious Shusett, I guess he's the writer, right, were exempt from the illness. Verhoeven, the director, required a steady stream of medication and fluids and regular access to a nearby ambulance in order to keep directing through the pain. That's dedication. Next, associate producer Elliot Schick felt terribly ill due to the rampant air pollution in Mexico City. Finally, the least surprising accident of the lot. Schwarzenegger repeatedly cut and damaged his hand, even breaking his finger at one point during the shooting of the film's innumerable punching stunts.
Yeah. Well, the sick portion, the reason why Arnie got away from it, because he got a bout of food poisoning years before Predator, and required anytime when he's filming on location and in foreign land to have food brought in for him.
It worked in his favor.
So Arnold was very smart about that. Because he did that for Predator.
Good job.
So he was smart. Yeah, so we brought that up back then when we covered Predator, Steve and I. Next up, Total Recall was possibly the most expensive movie ever made at the time of its production. Although exact accounts of Total Recall budget are elusive, official estimates have the film costing around $65 million. This neighborhood makes it one of the most, if not the most expensive movies produced by 1990. Until Waterworld came out a few years later.
The movie won an Oscar by winning the Special Achievement Award for Visual Effects at the 63rd Annual Academy Awards. Total Recall became the first and to date only Philip K. Dick film adaptation to win an Oscar. To date, meaning back then or up until current day? Okay.
Back then.
Total Recall was also the final live-action picture to receive the Special Achievement Prize. The only film to win since has been Toy Story, recognized 5 years later for its advancements in computer animation.
Interesting. Cool. Do you have any quotes from the particular movie?
Do you? Want to take turns?
Okay. Yeah, you go ahead.
When he talks to his contact, he's up in some apartment and he looks out the window and sees his contact setting this briefcase down by this phone, and then he goes down to get it, but this woman is taking it. She just decides to take it, and they start fighting, and he's like, "Get your own bag," and she goes, fuck you, asshole," and then he bows to her. It's not really a quote, but he just bowed to her after he took it.
Yeah,
I thought that was funny.
One would be get your ass to Mars.
I like when the robot driver says, the fare's 18 credits, please. After like it's all fire and everything's gone to hell and he's running out, and he goes, "The fare's 18 credits, please."
Oh, yeah.
And he goes, "Sue me, dickhead."
One that we know because I just love it because it's the our friend from Breaking Bad himself. He goes, "You got a lot of nerve showing your face around here, Hauser." He goes, "You should talk."
This one kind of went fast, but one of those mutant guys comes up to him and goes, "Hey, you want to know the future?" And he goes, "What about the past?" Because he doesn't know anything about his own past.
Or his elusive disguise that I like.
Yeah.
The woman, when he starts to break up and get ready for a surprise, and it blows up.
When he first runs into Melina and she goes, "Hello, Hauser, still bulging, I see." And I guess she pats his cock. I don't know. And she goes, "What you been feeding this thing?" And he goes, "Blondes."
One I like is from Benny himself, and of course it's the prostitute with the 3 breasts, and he looks at her and he goes, "Baby, I wish you make me. I wish I had 3 heads."
When he just faked out, when they're down in the reactor having the firefight, and he just faked out all these armed guys with his hologram, and then comes from the other direction and guns them down, and then he's sneaking around another corner and he goes, "Haha, you think this is the real Quaid? It is," and then guns them all down.
Yep. The last one I would have, I think you probably mentioned it before, but this would be his altercation with Lori, his ex-wife or wife, and he shoots her in the head. He goes, "Consider that a divorce."
Well, I only had one more, and it's the most famous one of the movie that everyone remembers, which is Michael Ironside's character Richter had told him, "I'll see you at the party later." And so then when he's fighting him on that lift and he's hanging off the edge and it chops his arms off, and then you see Arnie there with holding Richter's severed arms, and throws them down after him. "I'll see you at the party, Richter." Yeah,
it's always a one-liner from Arnie in any of these particular films.
That's kind of what we were there for.
It's literally what it is, and obviously they had, the typical exploitation of women, and they actually, in this one, I have to say, they actually made the women stronger, which I do appreciate. I do love a strong woman, mentally and willed and physically willed too, who could beat the hell out of me. But that's just my personality. But the fact that they actually did do that within the film, they actually made the woman a little bit stronger, not just being feeble and everything that we've seen in cinema before. And I just enjoyed that. Also for the fact that, the film went through issues of, if somebody who was schizophrenic at that time would go crazy watching this particular movie, in my opinion. Honestly, if you think about it, I don't know. They would be like,
yeah,
am I in a real world?
It reminds me a little bit. I never made this connection before, but of the show Legion, that can make you feel crazy too, especially the first season. Did you ever watch that?
Yeah, I did watch it, and I remember the comic, but the movie, the show made me a little bit nuts. That's why I couldn't follow your podcast for a while, because I was like, I wasn't going to watch that too often. The only thing that I liked was the what's her name from
Aubrey
Parks
Plaza.
and Rec. I like her,
but it's similar
Aubrey Plaza. But
especially in that first season, you weren't sure what the hell was real and what wasn't. Yeah.
what the hell was going on? Exactly. Dead Ringers is another one.
I don't know if I saw that.
Do you remember that? The remake that they had on
Really?
Netflix was amazing. Yeah, I thought that was an amazing twist. Dead Ringers was a Cronenberg movie
Okay.
back from the 80s, listeners, but they did a newer version, and Rachel Weisz was in it, and she played a set of twins, but it was kind of they kind of mind screwed you with their relationship and what they did as doctors. And towards the end, it gets really, really bad. But I'm not giving away anything, but it's crazy.
I like psychological horror.
And you got to watch it.
Sounds pretty good.
This was very much psychological, and there's a bit of physical involved in it, but mostly psychological. And it really captivated me. And my mother hates horror, but I mentioned it to watch that. I said, well, don't watch the Cronenberg version. Watch this one, which has Rachel Weisz. She goes, oh, I always liked her as an actress. And she watched it. She goes, it was a bit too bloody for me, but the idea of what went on with twins really captivated me. And I was like, good. So my mom actually did enjoy that particular show. So I highly recommend it to people if like you're into that whole Cronenberg twist, but in this case, it's more psychological than it is the physical violence or goriness of it. There is gore in it. Yes. Keep that in mind. But if you're okay with some of it, it's fine. But yeah. But that's the reason why I like the Total Recall as well, too, because it was such it's like a mind twist. And it's based on its original adaptation. But well, that was basically our coverage of the movie Total Recall. And I hope I hope you guys enjoyed it. But we're at the end of the podcast of where people could hear you as well, Jason. So this is a way for you to plug everything that you're covering with your network, any podcasts that in particular that you want to mention, and how people could actually join your Patreon.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I have this podcast network called Podcastica.com, which Mark has a podcast on. It's about the Sandman, but who knows when that's going to come back? Any news?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it was a great first season.
Yeah, we don't know.
So we cover mostly TV shows, and right now what I'm podcasting is we're finishing up the Daryl Dixon spinoff, Walking Dead spinoff, which actually has turned out to be surprisingly good. Really enjoying that. After that, we're gonna do a Walking Dead rewatch. We're gonna go back from the beginning and start watching that series all over again. I'm also doing Welcome to the White Lotus. We're right in the middle of White Lotus season 3, and my wife is my co-host with our friend Randy, and we're looking forward to season 3 coming up. We're in the middle of season 2. I think I said 3, but 2. I might start a Squid Games podcast next month. I'm thinking about doing that. I'm not sure yet. My other shows on there are all on break. That's Yellow Jackets, Poker Face, The Handmaid's Tale, Cobra Kai, and What If. Those are all the ones I'm doing. But you can find podcasts about all kinds of shows on there with our other great hosts. Wheel of Time, Loki, Ahsoka, Ted Lasso, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, all kinds of stuff. And then what else was I going to say? Oh, yeah, the Patreon is really fun, and that's my name, patreon.com/Jason Cabassi. We have a great group of people who all like hang out and do monthly activities and stuff like that. It's really fun.
Yeah, and that's exactly, for your listeners, I've mentioned it before. Jason's one of the few, just like Ben Beck, that were able to influenced me into wanting to do podcasting. So that's one of the reasons why. So this is like kind of a thank you to Jason, but having him on is always great, and having the Podfather on himself is always amazing. And he laughs at it, but we all say it. You know, Daphne and Paik have said it. I think Ben has said it, and so did Rima. But the thing is, it's true. I joined his Patreon, which was originally for Walking Dead cast. and I got to join a community of people, and I got to learn how to do podcasting in the early years, which was over 7.5 years ago. And I started around the same time as Rima. And I put out Panels to Pixels podcast. And then since then, I have created, Adrenaline Cinema, have done with Pirate Core, and have influenced other people to actually do more podcasts, which is great. And it's amazing. And it's fun. But with that, with his Patreon, you get to meet people. And, if you're looking for a community of people that love what you love, which is good TV, good movies, and people who love that kind of weird stuff in your life. We all have fun, all that geek out. And that's the whole point. So check out Podcastica.com or Jason Cabassi at Patreon.com. And then that way, if you join that, and I think it's like a $2 tier that you could start off at. And then that way you could join in, and there's a whole bunch of threads that you could join for stuff that people are covering on their particular podcasts on Podcastica, or in the general thread itself, or you could talk to me, or, you can find us anywhere.
And if any of this sounds interesting, but you don't want to plunk down any money, which is totally understandable, I would just check out podcastica.com to see if there's any podcasts. And also, if you just want to interact, like I said, but not spend any money right now, find the Podcastica group on Facebook. Just search for Podcastica. That's a free group. And, we put up posts for every show that we cover to people to comment on, and then we'll read them on the podcast. But also you could just talk to other members of the group on there about the different shows and stuff.
Yeah. Get to know the people that are on there and to make your decision. That would be the best thing to do, because Podcastica is huge, and you find a lot of people on Patreon that are on the actual Facebook Podcastica group itself.
Yeah.
With me, you could find me here, as always, on Adrenaline Cinema Podcast, as well as Pirate Core Entertainment. I also cameo on occasion. I had a host recently for Fantasy Picks Movie Edition while Rob was out, but we had covered Halloween Ends. So you could hear myself, Frank Rodriguez, and Adam Gonzalez on that particular podcast when we covered Halloween Ends on Fantasy Picks Movie Edition. You could hear me currently on what's out right now is Escape from New York from Adrenaline Cinema Podcast, which was before this particular episode with myself and Frank Rodriguez. We had a lot of good listenership. A lot of people were downloading. Thank you guys for that. You could also hear me on Panels to Pixels podcast with Steve Brown when we cover Loki Season 2. So we'll be doing that episodically. We already have episode 1 out. By the time you get this, probably episode 2 will be out around the same time. Our friend Kelly Burgess will probably be on for episode 3, depending on when she's available. And then Rob and I, in our continued coverage of Gen V, that's on Amazon Prime for Panels to Pixels as well. So we're covering that, and we're loving how crazy it is, because it's crazy like The Boys. Because it's a spin-off trade paperback that they converted into a new show. And we are just having fun with it. So it's just as bloody and just as crazy.
I got to catch that. I love The Boys. I've just got so much going on, but I'm definitely going to watch it.
Yeah, it's fun to do. Rob and I, and we just have a lot of fun doing it. I always look for other people just to jump in on occasion if they want to jump in on an episode. So Jason, you're always more than welcome if you want to jump in. It's so crazy. But the last episode that we did cover, episode 2, both Rob and I went into a whole social commentary about how it reflects a lot of society, and how there are a lot of red flags out there, and especially what the show represents. Please take that with a grain of salt at times, because don't take it too seriously. But also there is a serious aspect about it that we do talk about. Like, please don't take what they're doing in the show seriously, because not everybody has superhero powers with what they do. Do not cut yourself. Do not become bulimic and thinking you could go be small. That's our social commentary on that, because there are people out there that have a lot of mental issues. And if you do, please, and you question yourself, please do go seek out some help, because it's a world out there that mental health really needs to be addressed. But we do have fun with the show itself. it's interesting to talk about because of the comparisons with life and what they're doing in storytelling. But yeah, so you can hear me on Panels the Pixels podcast. For this particular show, if you want to send any sort of feedback, all you have to do is go to our Facebook group, which is facebook.com/AdrenalineCinemaPodcast. There you could find images of the topics that we're going to be covering. All you have to do is write them down in the comments below the image that we're going to be covering. I believe I did that. We didn't get any comments, which is okay. But if you have any thoughts from past or previous episodes, please do so. Send them our way. Or if you want to just email us, all you have to do is send it to AdrenalineCinemaPodcast@gmail.com. You could send out a regular texted email. If you feel like you don't want to email us regularly and you want to talk, just record yourself on your device, whether it be a phone, tablet, or even computer, and then just send that as an attachment and we'll play it. And like I said, it could be a past or present podcast that we're covering of whatever topic we're covering at the time. And as always, if there's a review available for Apple Podcasts or any other podcast player of choice, please do so. 5 stars are always appreciated. But I always tell everybody, just be honest. Just be honest about how you feel. Even if you don't like what you're hearing, give me really good criticism because, that always goes a long way too, because I could change what I could do. And that could always be an influence on what you would like us, like to hear from us. So we could be heard on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Deezer, or whatever podcast player of choice. Just check them all out there. I think there's over 30. And as always, check out PirateCoreEntertainment.com. You could always see our links there for Adrenaline Cinema Podcast. Watched it in the 80s. Yeah, give a nudge and poke Damien a little bit. Maybe he could come back. He wants to come back to do more podcasting, so I got to talk to him soon.
Yeah, I thought he was going to.
He's going to be. We have to do Explorers. I've been wanting to do Explorers because it's such an 80s movie. It's a cute little kid film. And Fantasy Picks Movie Edition. So check that out. But other than that, that's our podcast. And I just want to thank everyone for listening. I'm Mark.
I'm Jason.
And this was Adrenaline Cinema Podcast. And we'll talk to you guys later.
See you at the party.
Bye-bye.